I am here at the Festival of Quilts in Birmingham for 2025, and I have come across a glorious display of words. So we have Sara Impey here. Sara, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Sara Impey. I've been making quilts for actually most of my adult life. I made my first one aged 17 when I was still at school, but it was only about 20 years ago when I started stitching text onto my work that I felt I'd found my creative voice, if you like, which was some 30 years after I'd made my first quilt. So you could say it was a very long apprenticeship. And having my background is journalism, and I'm a bit of a frustrated writer, so the marriage of words and stitch was absolutely perfect for me, and that combination is still what inspires me and drives me on.
Yeah, well, I was drawn in by the words. I am a lover of poetry, so this drew me right in very quickly. Can you tell us a little bit about the piece beside you?
Sure, this is actually one of my favourite pieces because it's quite personal, and it's a one-off. It couldn't have been made at any other time. This is a diary of the first lockdown in COVID from March to June 2020. And we happened to have just moved into a new house 2 weeks before the lockdown began, and I started stitching tapes. I wanted to do a diary which was events that were happening in our lives and events that were going on nationally, both. But I didn't want to do it on one big piece of fabric because nobody knew how long the lockdown was going to last, or even if we were going to survive it. One forgets how frightening that time was. So at the end of 3 months of lockdown, I had about 60 of these tapes, and I had to decide how I was going to display them. And my original idea was just jumble them up and have them displayed on the floor, because it was a very confusing sort of time for everybody. And then I thought, well, that is crazy, because you lose the narrative thrust, if you like. So I decided to weave them together like a basket, so that the last few tapes are vertical and the rest are all horizontals. But I've woven the verticals through the horizontals, so you can stick your fingers through like that. Yeah. And my idea behind this was because there was a kind of a duality going on at the time, whereby we were all connected because we were all locked down and we were all in the same sharing the same experiences, but at the same time we were forced to be apart. So thinking metaphorically, the weaving was bringing us together, but the horizontal strips are disrupting the text, making it difficult to read, and that was the sort of disruption side of things. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was my thinking behind it. Of course, it does make it difficult to read, although you can sort of more or less puzzle it out, if you stand there for long enough.
Yeah.
But I have obviously got a record of the text on the computer.
Yeah.
But because it's such a one-off, and it could never be made again, and it's absolutely particular to that time, it's not one that I would ever want to part with, really.
Yeah.
So it's called Into Lockdown.
Okay, so let's talk about this piece.
This text on this piece is all about stitching from the viewpoint of the stitcher. And I'm sure a lot of people who make quilts, or indeed make anything, know that when you're making something, you're working with your hands. You get into a state where you're completely absorbed by what you're doing. It's very pleasurable. Hours fly past. You forget to have lunch and all that kind of thing. And it's really about that, and about the sort of dialogue with the materials, and also about the connection you feel with people who've stitched before you. We don't stitch in a vacuum, we're part of a continuum. Mm-hmm. And if you were to come to an event like this 20 years ago, the quilts would have looked very different. We are all of our time. And we're, in a sense, it's not so different from what women have been doing throughout the ages. I mean, the basic stitch hasn't changed for millennia. We use different tools and techniques now, but women in the past would have shared the same frustrations, ambitions, problem solving, all the things that you have to do now when you're making a quilt.
Yeah.
And the background of this, which might look from a distance as though it's been spray dyed or space dyed, is actually threads which I have saved from previous projects and spread out over the background, and then trapped them all behind a layer of organza, and then stitched the text through all the layers on the top. So there was a certain amount of, well, there is with every quilt, but there was quite a lot of preparatory work went on with this one before I even started stitching the text. So that's haptic feedback.
Can you tell us a little bit about the words, because they look so perfectly placed and it looks like each individual letter was done on its own?
Yes, it is free machine quilting. Some people think it's digital embroidery, which is very flattering. But it's not. It's actually free machine quilting on the sewing machine, one letter at a time. And then, of course, with this technique, it's very free, because I can actually, with a piece like this, I can compose it in my head as I stitch it without marking the fabric, without writing it out first. I'm literally stitching it as I go along, and writing it in my head to fit the space I've got available, so that I don't have a great big breaks at the end of the line. I find that I can carry on quite a long time like this, doing it, because what I do is I don't cut the bobbin threads underneath. I leave, so that is sort of holding the whole thing together. And with all the top threads, obviously with every single letter, you have the top threads left loose. Yeah. I cut them between each letter, and then after stitching a few words and cutting a few threads, I get up and pull the threads through to the back, and then do a few more words and then a few more finishings off. And I find I can get into a working rhythm where you're not just sort of sitting at the sewing machine solidly for half an hour. You're varying your posture, you're varying what you're doing. You're standing up, sitting down. And so that's how I get rid of the ends, which is always something that somebody asks me. Of course, what happens then is that you have a complete bird's nest of ends on the back. And I've already got 3 layers. So what I do is I put a 4th layer on the back, purely to hide all these threads. And I find a way of quilting it to secure it, so that it fits in with the design on the front. So for example, with this one, I quilted another layer of parallel lines in between each row of text. And that is purely to hold on the 4th layer, and they are the only stitches that you see on the back. Yeah. So that's the technique I've kind of evolved over the years, and it's pretty much what I do with every single one of these quilts, actually. Yeah. Even the things that are 3-dimensional or big, small, whatever it is. Yeah, that's how I do it. This one I called Brexit Boar, and I was imagining that if an archaeologist from the future drilled a hole down through the earth during the Brexit years, this is what they might have come up with. It's a history of Brexit in layers, if you like. So it starts at the bottom with the first referendum in 1975, which I actually remember voting in, and it goes all the way up, salient Brexit happenings up to the resignation of Theresa May, which was in 2019, and then at the top it says bored with Brexit, because I think we were all at that time. Yeah. So that's the history of that, and it's actually, I made lots and lots of individual tapes which are quite small, and then I pinned them, literally with pins, onto lagging tubing, which you can get from a hardware store, and then pinned them all on, and then put them all inside an acrylic tube. This is my Brexit Earth core. So cool. And it's not really about whether you were in favour of Brexit or against Brexit. Yeah. It's just about the history of Brexit. Yeah. Imagining that you were drilling down through the earth in the future. Yeah, and also it's really important to have the conversation, right? Whether it's for or against, it's having the conversation. Absolutely, and sharing your thoughts with the world. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at the piece behind you. Right, this piece here, I said earlier on that I almost always use, did I say earlier on? I can't remember. Always use polyester threads. Okay. In this particular one I used cotton threads because I wanted the threads to adhere to the background, and I think cotton is very slightly more fibrous and less slippery than polyester. And somebody said to me once, while I was watching me stitching and seeing all the loose ends that I get, well, why don't you leave them like that? It looks rather nice. And I thought, well, up for a challenge, I'll do a quilt where I don't finish off the thread ends. And this was the result. And this quilt is actually about dementia, although in a sense I didn't think about that until I was some way into making it. All it says is, I keep on going round in circles and I keep on losing the thread, repeated over the entire surface. And then the threads are sort of rather fogging out the words so you don't see them clearly, and that was sort of deliberate. And it was actually quite quick to make because I didn't have to finish off all the thread ends, but it was very fiddly because I had all these loose threads on the surface. So I started in the middle and I had to keep pushing the threads into the middle to clear the decks so I could stitch as I got bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, by the time I finished it looked absolutely dreadful. And then I thought, well, what would happen if I comb it, literally with a comb, out from the middle, which is what I do with this. And so there's nothing really adhering these threads to the background, they're just doing it themselves. So if you put it by a window, you know, on a windy day, it would just all go off in one direction. And every single time this quilt gets taken off the wall and packed up, it gets into a complete mess again. So when I arrive somewhere like here, I have to get my comb out and comb it. Give it a good, you know, give it a good comb. Yeah, but I was thinking about dementia. Dementia touches so many families. My mother-in-law died from it. You know, it affects many, many lives, and it's an absolute scourge and it's absolutely dreadful. And that was sort of the genesis of this particular piece.
Yeah, what a wonderful message.
And I called it No Exit.
No Exit, yeah.
Which is probably a bit of a pessimistic title, but...
Yeah, oh, well, it brings your thoughts together brilliantly. So I just want to touch on how, you know, you have this beautiful show that you've mounted at the Festival of Quilts. How did that come about?
Well, I just feel very, very fortunate. They contacted me ages ago, probably before Christmas. And of course I said, wow, yes, please, fantastic. And then I thought, oh my God, there's only 6 months. I can't make, you know, enough new work in that time. And they said, oh, that's absolutely fine. People like to see what you've made in the past, so you see a sort of progression. So that was a bit of a sigh of relief. I mean, I have made some new pieces, especially for this show. Yeah. But life has a way of intervening. My daughter had a baby in April, so I knew I had to finish all the new stuff by April. Yeah. So all the new work was done, ready by April. And then it's been brilliant. They were very helpful with the hanging. The whole thing has been a wonderful experience. Yes, well, it really has come together so well. So one more thing I want to talk about before we go, and that is this book. So can you tell me about your book? Yes, well, this book, because it was such a wonderful opportunity, we wanted to do a book, but I didn't want it to be just a catalogue of everything that was here. So it's got pictures, images of quilts that are here, most of them, not all. And but also lots of pictures of quilts that aren't in this particular exhibition, often because I haven't got them anymore, you know, I've sold them or whatever. And I've called it Context, Words and Stitch, because for me the words are as important as the stitch. I'm a journalist by background. I'm really actually a frustrated writer, if truth be known. And so it's got quite a lot of the texts that are quite difficult to read on some of these quilts are actually in here. Again, not all of them, because there wouldn't have been room. So it's a little bit of a story of my quilting life, but I mean, I've been making quilts. I made my first quilt over 50 years ago, so it doesn't go back that far, but certainly the last 10 years or so, quite a lot of my work is in here, and a few poems as well. I've started writing poetry. Sorry to inflict poetry on the world, but so yeah, it's more. You know, I like to think it's more than just a catalogue, it's actually a book. Yeah. And so it's fabulous to have the opportunity to do it. Wonderful. Okay, so can you tell us, if people are watching this YouTube video right now, where can we find you online? Where you can find me online, I have a website, which is saraimpey.com, Sarah without an H, I always have to say. And I'm on Instagram at sarah.impey. Okay, and Impey is I-M-P-E-Y. Great. That's right. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story today, and congratulations on mounting a wonderful show. Well, thank you very much for, you know, inviting me to take part. My pleasure.